and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's nice to see a lot of friendly faces as well as some new ones. Really appreciate you tuning into the Wild Speaker Series. And this month for June, we are talking all about trails. So we have a great event planned to celebrate National Trails Day, which is in just a couple days on this Saturday. Before we get started, I want to respectfully acknowledge that the lands we're speaking from are the traditional lands of the Nuwubi or Southern Paiute, here where I am in Las Vegas. And I also acknowledge that some of our speakers are on the traditional lands of the Washoe and Northern Paiute in what is now known as Reno. These peoples have been living on and with these lands for countless generations, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and future. So again, welcome everyone. I'm Grace Palermo and I'll be hosting tonight. I use she, her pronouns and am the Southern Nevada Programs Director at Friends of Nevada Wilderness. Friends of Nevada Wilderness is a statewide nonprofit focused on protecting wild lands. Wilderness areas are places that are natural landscapes that are largely unaffected by people, and we protect these lands in a few main ways. So first off, we advocate by speaking up for these lands to get them permanently protected and make sure they're managed to maintain their wildness. We also educate by sharing the values and vision of wilderness at tabling events, presentations like this one, and generally try to find common ground to protect our wildland heritage. And we do a whole lot of stewarding. So because these lands cannot protect themselves, we work with volunteers on the ground to help monitor and restore these spectacular places. And thanks for joining us again for the Wild Speaker Series tonight. We hold these the first Thursday of every month and try to host a local environmental expert for folks who are interested in the outdoors to learn more about hikes, local habitat, and ways to get involved with conservation efforts. So tonight, I'm really excited. We're hearing from 4 of our staff about all things trails. Trails are really important because they're how many, if not most people, access and enjoy wilderness areas. And that's why Friends of Nevada Wilderness does so much to maintain, build, and help you know how to access your trails. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. As we're going on, if you're not speaking, we're going to ask you to keep yourself on mute. And if we start to have any bandwidth issues, I may also turn off cameras so that our speakers come through clearly. And lastly, I want to make sure you all know that this event is being recorded. So with that, I am really excited for tonight. Hopefully folks have questions. Feel free to put those in the chat or comments throughout the presentation. And even if you don't have a question, we'd love to just hear what stands out to you too. And so tonight, we are looking at a great presentation, first off with Tara Kleeman, our Trails Coordinator, and then we'll hear from Kurt Kuznicki, our Associate Director, as well as Peter Sbraccia, our Southern Nevada Stewardship Coordinator, and Jake Kastner, our Map Guy or GIS Coordinator. And we'll wrap up, as always, with a Q&A. And so with that, I will pass it off to you, Tara.
Thanks, Grace. Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Kleeman, as Grace mentioned. This is actually my 4th year with Friends, but I just moved into the role of Trails Coordinator. I started here in 2018 as a trail crew member and have since been the crew leads moving forward. So now as Trails Coordinator, I'm working alongside with Kurt on basically coordinating our season, and I'm lucky enough to still be able to get out in the field and lead a crew all summer. Tonight, I'm super excited to share with you some of my favorite trails that we've worked on and traveled on here on the Humboldt Toiyabe. And maybe give you some exciting ideas of places to go or trails to visit this summer or into the fall. Let me go ahead and share my screen and I'll get started. All right. Since I've been with Friends, our trail crew has actually maintained over 175 miles of trails on the Humboldt-Toiyabe in these wilderness areas. So specifically, our Northern Nevada chapter works on central, eastern, and northern wilderness areas. And tonight I'll just be touching on a few of them. We've got the Ruby Mountains up in the northeast, along with East Humboldt. And then down in central Nevada, Arc Dome, we've got Alta Tequima and Table Mountain. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off with Ruby Mountain Wilderness. This is maybe the one that most people have heard of. It's often referred to as the Swiss Alps of Nevada, and for really good reason. It's absolutely a gorgeous, gorgeous wilderness area. As you can see in this photo, there are these huge U-shaped glacially carved valleys, really big granite peaks, alpine lakes. It's stunning, got incredible views, and most people who've heard of any wilderness in Nevada probably have heard of the Rubies. We particularly like working in the Rubies because it does see a lot of traffic, contrary to many of our other wilderness areas that are way more remote. And it's important as wilderness to make sure we're maintaining that element of solitude in our wilderness areas. So instead of just having the one Ruby Crest trail, which is a great trail, we like to work on some of these side trails that lead up to it, alternative access, and just other options for people to experience wilderness in a quieter fashion. My absolute favorite trail in the Ruby Mountains is Colonel Moore Trail. And if anyone who lives in Ruby Valley is watching right now, you'll probably be a little upset with me for sharing this little secret trail, but I think it's worth everyone knowing about and hopefully visiting at some point. I don't think it's going to get too crowded. It's a tough trail. So this trail starts actually on the east side of the Rubies, and because of the nature of the terrain of the Rubies, especially on the east side, it's pretty steep. It's hard to tell in this photo, but it's a really quick climb up to the Ruby Crest. Once you get up to the top, you've got stunning views. You're looking to the south at Favre Lake, up to the west over Liberty Lake, and then over in the east, you're looking at range after range going into Utah. So completely stunning views from the top there. This trail we worked back on 2019, and it was a huge project. It took us 2 hitches. It's a short trail, only about 3 miles, but in order to connect the completely lost trail, we had to spend a lot of time scouting, connecting different little spur trails, using our maps to make sure we're back on the original trail. And we basically restored something that would have been lost otherwise. So if you get a chance to get on the east side of the Rubies, this one's spectacular. You probably won't see too many people, and you're gonna get some of the best views of the Rubies. Another favorite of mine, we worked last year on Overland Lake Trail. So most of the time, people access Overland Lake either from Harrison Pass or from Lamoille Canyon on the Ruby Crest Trail. And this trail just offers another alternative. Just get away from the crowds, take a lesser traveled path. But this trail is really well maintained. It's about 5 miles long, 3,000 feet of gain, pretty gradual for what it is. And it's got great views along the way, and you end up at this incredible alpine lake. So don't miss Overland if you're in the area. A few other trails that we've worked on in the Rubies recently, up here in the northeast, we've got the Krinka Trail. This one's fun. It's got 51 switchbacks all the way to the top. So that's always a good time. It leads into Soldier Basin and offers an alternative entrance into Soldier Basin. A lot of the locals talk about the fishing up in that area. It's supposed to be some of the best, so that's a good way to access that. We've also worked on the John Day Trail over here on the west side. And that one's a really good trail for fall because it's in the aspens, super pretty color changes, really quiet. It's short. You could do it just as a picnic hike, a day hike with the family, 1.3 miles, and it kind of fades out after that. There is a user trail that keeps going all the way up to the crest, but it's not an official trail. So I recommend just doing the first 1 mile, get some nice views of the fall colors, and then turn around. There are some hunters out there in the fall, so you want to make sure you're wearing bright colors there. We also had an opportunity to work in Lamoille Canyon down here, specifically at the Right Fork Trail. So the popular trail goes up to Liberty Lake. Right Fork still gets a good amount of traffic, but it's a little less traveled. And this one is the photo that I showed on the first slide. That's the Right Fork Valley. That one is incredible views the whole way up. It's really steep in the beginning, but once you get to the valley up higher, it's a nice long meadow walk along a creek with a beautiful waterfall. And it's one of those, if you're in Lamoille Canyon, you can't miss it. If you're up at the Rubies already, you might as well stop by East Humboldt Wilderness. East Humboldt is really amazing. This photo here is of the hole in the wall area from Lizzie's Basin, and that's over on this red arrow right here, if you can see me circling that. The only issue with the East Humboldt is it's pretty hard to access. There aren't many trailheads that are open to the public, and that's because a lot of them are private. So we just take what we can get. Right up here where this photo is the, like I said, the hole in the wall trail, or the hole in the wall in Lizzie's Basin. And that trail kind of traverses the side of the East Humboldts and takes you to Winchell Lake. So it's an 8-mile trail. Winchell Lake's actually right in the middle of it. And you can access it either from here at Lizzie's Basin or up near Angel Lake. And East Humboldts are pretty cool because it's the only place in Nevada so far that I've seen a mountain goat, which was amazing. And that was at Winchell Lake. So you've got a good chance of seeing some wildlife there. Another trail we've worked on in East Humboldt, which is a great hike, is down here called Secret Star. This one is accessed from Secret Pass, which is the pass in between the Rubies and East Humboldt. And this trail, we worked about 8 miles back. It keeps going and going. It's not well maintained past those 8 miles. So if you're looking for something that's a little more well maintained, that might not be your best option, but getting back to that 8-mile point is really incredible. It's super remote. There's a couple trails up to the Boulder Lakes, the first boulder and the second boulder. Those have been maintained maybe 5 years ago, so they're probably a bit overgrown, but you could still follow them. All right, moving on to Central Nevada. Whoever works in the travel office in Austin has a really great sense of humor, first of all, and they also know how special their backyard is, because once you drive through Austin, you're gonna need a bigger bucket list. There's 3 wilderness areas here. We've got Arc Dome, starting from west to east. We've got Arc Dome, Alta Tequima, and Table Mountain. We worked extensively in all 3 of these wilderness areas, and I've grown quite fond of all of them. This season, we are going to be hitting Arc Dome really heavily. My crew specifically is going to be working the 9-mile trail up Jet Canyon to Sheep Canyon. And this trail is going to offer an alternative access to the Toiyabe Crest Trail. And I'm sure Jake's going to talk a little bit about the Toiyabe Crest Trail, but that traverses the entire Toiyabes, and it's an amazing trail. Up here, we're also planning on connecting the Arc Dome Trail. So the Toiyabe Crest does a little loop down here, And the Arc Dome Trail takes you to the summit of Arc Dome and kind of cuts off some of the Toiyabe Crest if you're not looking to hike the whole thing. We hope to get over to Stewart and Columbine, which are some of the more popular trails in Arc Dome. It's got a really nice campground over there. And then Kurt, which I'll let him talk a little bit more about, is going to be working with volunteers out on the North-South Twin River Loop. So this is a 15-mile loop that is possible to be done in a day, or it's a really great backpacking option. You can hike up from either trailhead. They're only about a mile apart. So if you're ambitious, you can do a whole loop in the day and walk back to your car on once you get back down to the trailhead. That one's got quite a few creek crossings. So if you're going to do that in the early summer, you want to make sure you're prepared to get your feet wet. All right, the next range over, we have Alta Tequima. Our other crew this summer is planning on doing a really awesome trail all the way from the north, Moores Creek, across all the summits of Mount Jefferson down to the Jefferson Summit Trailhead. So that turns into about a 15-mile section of trail that they're going to be maintaining. And it's going to be an awesome opportunity for people to get out and access Mount Jefferson from different trailheads. Back in 2018, we worked from the Pine Creek Trailhead. There's a really great campground there. It's got a creek that runs through it pretty much most of the season. So it's our most reliable water source in the area. And the trail we worked makes this really great lollipop hike. So you hike up Pine Creek, this big red arrow is pointing to it. And this nice little loop right here takes you up and over Middle Summit and then down near this amazing alpine lake. And if you are looking for wildlife, you're almost, I won't guarantee it, but you're almost guaranteed to see bighorn in Alta Tequima. It's the place to see bighorn in the Central Nevada wilderness areas. Also, another really cool thing about Alta Tequima is its ancestral history. When we were out there, we saw a lot of signs of ruins. Apparently back in, I think the 80s, don't quote me on that, I'm not an expert on this, but there was a settlement found that was determined to be the highest altitude Native American settlement in North America. So that's a really, really neat place to feel connected to your ancestors, see a bunch of wildlife, get some amazing views while you're out there. Next range over, Table Mountain Wilderness. I've worked a lot in Table Mountain, and something about Table Mountain, it's got the best clouds in all of Nevada that I've ever seen. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because there's such wide views, but the clouds are always just mind-blowing. So that's reason enough to check out Table Mountain. But even more so, Table Mountain is the place to find elk. So one range over, you see the bighorn, pop over to Table, you've got all the elk. It's pretty incredible. We've spent some time a couple years ago working on South Mosquito and North Mosquito Trail. And yes, both of those have mosquitoes on them, depending the time of year, specifically when we were there in the summer. So you want to keep that in mind. And up north a little bit farther, we worked a really neat trail called the Tule Trail, Tule Creek. And that one, we didn't actually get any information about the road to it because we accessed it from Morgan Basin, but it's a really cool trail if you continue along Morgan Basin to get a little bit more remote and Table and away from the crowds. Farther down south here, we've got Cottonwood and Barley. Those are the two popular trailheads or it's one trailhead, but two trails leading from it in Table Mountain. So many people visit this relative to Central Nevada, and it's a really cool loop. This last season, we're able to connect between Cottonwood and Barley, a trail called Tip Over. And it's just this wide open valley that meanders through and takes you from one side to the other. So Cottonwood's all full of willows and along the creek, Barley's got a more deserty, dry feeling. And then the Tip Over kind of connects the two to make a really, really nice loop. So that's all I'm going to talk about for trails. As you can probably imagine, I could go on and on about all these trails. I absolutely love them. Every time I go out, I fall more and more in love with central, northern, eastern Nevada. And I'm super lucky to be able to get out there and hopefully share some of these experiences with you. Some of the maps that I put on here were actually from our website. If you're looking for ways to access our trails, that's a really good place to start. If you have questions about trails that you think we might have worked on, but you're not sure, just feel free to shoot any of us an email. We'll try and get back to you and let you know what the status is. And with that, I also do plan on updating on the website some of the current conditions of our trails, but that's going to be a long project. So maybe not this summer, but in the future, keep an eye out for that. And with that, I will pass it on to Kurt, our Associate Director. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah, for talking about all the trails we've done and all the hard work of the crew. And before I get started, I kind of scrolled through to see who's on the list. And, so many of my friends from Southern Nevada, I can't mention you all, but I just want to say that I miss you. But I do have to give a shout out to my friends, Hermie Hyatt. I don't know if John's there, but hello. So anyway, with that, I will start my presentation. So my name is Kurt Kuznicki. I'm the Associate Director of Friends in Nevada Wilderness, and I also supervise the trail crew. So I've been doing the trail crew for 9 years. I have to say, of all of the odd jobs that I've done during my life, the trail crew is the most fun and actually the most rewarding. So I feel really fortunate to be able to work with folks like Tara and Jake and Peter and Grace. And, it's good for an old guy to hang out with the young folks every once in a while too. So with that, I would like to start my presentation. So what's happening to our trails? Where are they going? Or as I like to say, why can't we have nice things? So, I would be naive if I started this conversation in 1930 with the Civilian Conservation Corps and the WSP, because that would be very rude to our Native Americans and First Nations peoples who have been traversing the Great Basin for thousands and thousands of years, up one range and down the other, through the basin, through the deserts, the rivers, and all of their travels, and their trading with tribes in California and Utah and to the north. So, that's probably most assuredly where a lot of our trails got their start. Not quite the trails that we would call hiking trails today, but, faint trails to get them where they're going. Maybe if, the whole village moved, they'd be bigger trails. And with that came the explorers and the pioneers and the mountain men, Fremont, Carson, Jedediah Smith, and those folks led by native guides using those same trails. Carson Pass, an example of, one of the routes that they pioneered. So, our trail system began to get developed, not what I would call sustainable trails, but easy routes to move back and forth. And with that came the pioneers and wagons and folks, looking to make a better life for powered by greed, let's say, miners and things like that. A lot of the roads, or a lot of our trails, were roads into mines, and these folks are going from point A to point B, not building the most sustainable trails, maybe going straight up the fall line, which despite what you may do, it's totally unsustainable. So that affected our trail system as well. Anyone that's hiked in Nevada knows that there's a lot of cattle out there. I'm not going to get into that issue, but you're trying to build a trail and you get there and you look on the ground and there's 10 trails going in 12 different directions. And it's like, how are we going to make sense of this? And it makes it really tough, you know, to try and try to get a handle on that. So one of my favorite trails that Tara brought up, Pine Creek. Pine Creek was actually a road that led to a sawmill, and that sawmill moved the lumber by oxen down that road, which now is turned into a trail. So that had a lot of effect on it. Maury and Fandango, wilderness study areas out in Nye County. A lot of charcoal kilns out there. The charcoal was used for the smelters. So, you know, those roads were put in, and, you know, over time, the road was right by the creek bed because that, you know, was the easiest way to go. And then flash floods have, you know, taken those out and then eroded those trails. So, you know, a lot of the stuff that we're calling trails got its start as roads. In the 1930s, you know, to put people back to work, probably one of our greatest conservation presidents, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, went ahead and had the Civilian Conservation Corps and the WPA start trails. They worked on trails in the shell creeks and the high shells, along with ranchers. Ranchers worked on trails there as well to get their sheep and their cattle up into that range. They also worked in Arc Dome, although interesting enough, I always thought it was the CCC in Arc Dome, but Arc Dome, the trails there were built in part by the Army Corps of Engineers. If you've ever been out to Arc Dome, there's a lot of admin sites, a lot of Forest Service buildings. I can only imagine how nice that trail system was after they finished, and you know, all the support it had with the Forest Service out there. That would have been pretty cool. You know, they did amazing work. For those of you in Southern Nevada going up the Harris Springs Trail, the beautiful rock work that's done on that trail is just amazing. It's one of my favorite parts of that whole trail, the parts on the South Loop. Up north in the Santa Rosas, there's just some beautiful rock work done as well. You know, it's if you've worked on trails and you come across this beautiful artwork, you just, or rock work, you consider it artwork, and you just sit there and we're all taking pictures of it and think about, you know, everything was done. So, you know, they did some great work on there and some good sustainable hiking trails as well. After World War II, when the GIs came back, they had seen the world, you know, they had fought the good fight and they wanted to see America. So they wanted to go outside. There was a big push to get folks outside. The Jeep was open to civilians. So, you know, they loaded up their Jeeps and headed out, and in part, agencies like the NDOW, the Nevada Department of Wildlife, encourage them to go out to hunt, to explore. You know, more hunters, more money coming in handout to fund their agencies. For those of you who have been to Table Mountain, like Tara was saying, those roads or those trails on top, the old 2-track is still there. There's a lot of those that were first put by, you know, folks in Jeeps, and a lot of times it was easy just to cut up that riparian area and go up that way and get to the top and go ahead and go. And you know, because those trails got their start down there, now we are faced with this battle through the riparian area, where if it could have been maybe moved on the hillside and out of the creek, it would have been much easier. Tara talked about the East Humboldt, one of my favorite ranges. Absolutely, it's awesome, but the access points are so limited. You know, you got Angel Lake, you got Secret Pass, you got Lizzie's Basin, and that's really it. You know, in this whole trail process, I tried to get a hold of some landowners to say, hey, can we come out on your property? You know, and they wouldn't call me back, or they feared we were with the government, or what are we doing? So we don't have access. And then, you know, with our limited resources, do I really want to work on a trail that folks can't get to? So that's a huge concern as well. So, you've got unsustainable trails. You go ahead and you have cattle all over the place making their own trails. You fight up the riparian area. There's a lot of challenges. The Forest Service is, strapped for cash. There's no other way to say it. So much of their budget goes to fighting fire that, that doesn't leave a whole lot left. There's law enforcement issues. One of the places we worked a few years ago turned out there was the largest pot grow in Nye County, close to the trail we were working on, So, trails are not a high priority for the Forest Service. That being said, it's not like the Forest Service does not care. I'm very fortunate to work with a lot of forest people who really do care a lot about trails. The Forest Service is really generous, providing vehicles to our Central Nevada crew this year. They provide a place for Grace and Peter to live, or I should say to work. So, they provide office space. They were very generous this year to both Northern and Southern Nevada to provide money through the Great American Outdoors Act to work on trails close to my friends in Southern Nevada, as well as the folks up here. So, they're doing what they can, but they can't afford a trail crew. So, who's doing this work? Well, it's fallen on nonprofits, groups like Friends of Nevada Wilderness. Our trail program has started out really small, and now, every season it seems to be getting a little bigger. We're doing what we can. GBI also does trail work in Nevada. We're very fortunate to have those folks. And then, there's another group called Wilderness Volunteers. I believe they're out of Utah. They do trail work as well. And there's probably a few other friends groups. So, we do what we can. I think there's around 408 miles on the Humboldt-Toiyabe National Forest. Northern Nevada probably gets, on a good season, maybe 75 miles. So, that's not a whole lot. And, Southern Nevada does what they can, spend a lot of time working on that Griffith Peak Trail. So it comes down to a point of us having to prioritize what we're able to work on. We can't work everywhere. So I consult with the Forest Service. The Rubies, a lot of folks going to the Rubies. That was a priority one season. Arc Dome is a priority this year. Table Mountain a few years ago. We're also going up to Jarbidge this year. We're trying to get as much as we can. I am on a 5-year maintenance schedule. So I try to stay away from a trail, 5 years rotation. In 5 years, that's not enough time, especially if it's in a riparian area. There's a trail in Alta Tequima called Pasco Canyon. Beautiful, beautiful trail. Tight, narrow canyon, gorgeous. We've worked on that twice. I sent a crew out, I guess it was last year, or not last year, but the year before. Trail was gone. The tread was still there, but it was a jungle. I had 2 guys work on it, gosh, for a week. And, they got like 100 yards. And probably got 100 ticks a day as well. So, it's like, okay, I love that trail, but I can't, it's like a doctor. It's like triage. I can save 3 patients, or I can spend all my time trying to work on this person. So, and it's heartbreaking to see that. We've lost trails in the Grand Quins. I go on the trail list and there's all sorts of miles there, but you go out to the Grand Quins, there's nothing. Arc Dome has lost trails. Some of the trails on the southwest side are just gone. Marysville is a jungle. I just, so I plug away on the trails that I've done for 5 years. The east side of Table, all of those trails that go up the east side of Table are gone. Mount Moriah lost trails with a fire and a flood. Fortunately, they're trying to get funding to work on those trails again, but we just can't keep up, and it's a sad thing. But not to be, a total downer here. I want to give you folks some hope. So what can we do? What can we do to save our trails? Well, I tell you this, and it might sound like a commercial, but it's the truth. You can support Friends of Nevada Wilderness. You can give generously. We try to make every buck count. We want to field a crew every season. If I could put 4 crews in the field and fully fund them, I would do it tomorrow. But, unfortunately, it cost about $10,000 a hitch. It's not cheap by any means to put a crew in the field. So, you can generally support Friends of Nevada Wilderness. If you're on a trail that Friends has done, you could call the Forest Service and say, hey, this trail looks good. You ought to make the rest of them like this. They need to hear feedback from you, not complaints. Complaints not a bad thing either, but, constructive criticism will actually, maybe they'll take notes instead of just listening to you and then hang up. So do that. If you have a favorite trail, if you go out on a trail and it's like, this thing is falling apart, and go ahead, and if you go on their website, I'm going to be kind, and I'm not going to give the person's name out on this recording, but if you really want to know who to send your trail crew reports to, get a hold of Grace or go on the Friends website and you can find out how to get in touch with me. They actually do have forms you can fill out on reporting trails and roads that need maintenance, but you can speak up. You can say, hey, this needs work. And they're listening. Trails are important. They can't they can't field their own crews, but they can definitely get with us. And if you have trails that you want fixed and they know about it, that actually helps me out too when we come to prioritize what we're going to do in the last season. And finally, if you want to help this year, you can join me out in Arc Dome. I'm also going to be doing some trips in Jarbidge. And you can sign up for those trips through the Friends website. And then at the end of this, I believe Grace is going to post some trips that we have going. So give me a call. I might be out there for 8 days, but you can come, for what you can and help out and make a difference for trail. Do what you can. I don't know if we can save all of them, but every mile we can save is worth it. So that is my short and dirty presentation. So I would like to pass it over to Peter, who I must say is looking very dapper tonight.
Why, thank you, sir.
Man, I felt bad. I wanted to go change my shirt. So anyway, and hello once again, and I miss you and I love you to my Southern Nevada friends, and I'll just go back into the dark sky here and hang out. So if you have any questions, I'll hang out to the end, and I look forward to the rest of the presentations. So thanks.
Thank you, Kurt. I'll pick up with Southern Nevada and kind of tie in some stuff from Tara and Kurt about, kind of where trails are going, how you can help, and where you can get outside down here to enjoy some of the trails. I'm also going to talk a bit about our upcoming projects down here and our 2020 accomplishments, which include that Griffith Peak Trail that Kurt had mentioned. All right. So I guess we'll start out with 2020. So back in 2020, we had kind of a different year than we usually do. We rely a lot on volunteers down here. We don't field a Southern Nevada trail crew. We just have volunteer folks who come out and join in the past. Grace and myself, or me, or Jose, or Shailin, or any of the people you've met out on our trail crew in the past, we take you guys out in the field, and you guys do a ton of work for public lands and for the agencies we work with down here. So we work with all the land management agencies, the federal ones down here in Southern Nevada. So we work with the Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife Service, the Forest Service that Kurt mentioned, as well as the National Park Service and the Bureau of Reclamation on, you know, this rare occasion here and there. So in a typical year, we'll do like 20 or more volunteer projects. But in 2020, we had, you know, obviously some curtailment to bringing people out in the field. But we did have quite a few projects in 2020. Let me just pull that up really quickly from my notes. We had 37 stewardship projects in 2020, which was really good. I actually underestimated how many we usually do. So we still managed to pull off 37 projects, but we only had 66 volunteers. So a lot of those projects were staffed by our staff down here in Southern Nevada, or our wonderful and intrepid AmeriCorps members who were on last year. Melissa, who will be back this year, and Jackie, who works over with the Fish and Wildlife Service now as one of our agency partners. But those 37 projects, like I said, they happen on all different types of public lands around Southern Nevada, in wilderness areas around Clark County. We've got 18 wilderness areas down here and a few more that hopefully will get established in this next year coming up. So we did 780 hours of volunteer work in 2020 all over and around the Las Vegas Valley. But our big project was the completion of Griffith Peak Trail, which we had been working on since 2018. So that's one of those trails that could have been just lost forever, as Kurt had mentioned with some of the other more remote areas. Griffith Peak Trail is not, it's remote, but it's very close to Las Vegas. So when you're out there, you know, you might as well in a lot of ways be way out, but you can see the whole valley. You can see the Pahrump Valley, and it's right here in the Mount Charleston Wilderness, just minutes from the valley. So it's about 6 miles long. It's 5.7 miles. And back in 2013, the whole top of the mountain back there burnt down in the Carpenter 1 fire that burned about 28,000 acres of old ancient growth bristlecone forest up at the top there. So a lot of those trees are not going to come back in our human kind of lifetime time scale. But it is, you know, growing back up there with different types of plants. There's some trees sprouted. There's lots of flowers and grasses moving in. So things aren't looking too bad, and the trail is reopened. But because the fire was so intense and burnt so hot and for so long, the soils were really destroyed. So after the fire, when floods came through, it washed out the whole trail basically, and knocked down hundreds of these old growth trees, 2 and 3 foot diameter stumps, 4 foot stumps. Some of them, they're really big. So our volunteers have been working from end to end, from the Harris end, the Harris Springs Road that Kurt mentioned, which was built by the CCC way back when to hop over the mountains and get into the Pahrump Valley, but it was stopped because they didn't really need it. There's other ways to get there that are a lot less intense than driving straight over the Spring Mountains. So where the road ends, the trail starts, and we recut a reroute up there that was pretty extensive, about a half a mile long, I think, a trail, where a huge washout had made it just impassable. So we rebuilt some of the work below that beautiful stonework that was put in, which has held up over the decades. For 80 years now, it's just been up there, beautiful steps on top of the mountain. It looks like you're in the Lord of the Rings or something. And beyond that, just last year in 2020, we removed 119 trees from Griffith Peak Trail. With the trees moved before that, I'm certain it's well above 200 trees taken out of those 5.7 miles connecting the top of South Loop Trail there, where it hits the saddle on top of the mountain, and then you either head north to Charleston or go off to Griffith, back down to the Harris watershed area. So all in all, including like support work to get the trails ready for our pack mules that we hire up to bring in all the water and gear for volunteers and our trail staff. All that stuff, we did 38 projects to get that trail rebuilt since 2018. Let's see here, and we had overall about 80 volunteers. That's not like repeats, that's people. There's tons of people worked on the mountain. Thousands of hours of volunteer time put in, and about we also put in some kiosks down at the Harris end as well. And like I mentioned, we spent a lot of time fixing up the South Loop Trail, getting it ready for the pack stock, making sure it's passable for people to get in. So that was kind of our big 2020 push, was to get Griffith Peak opened, and it did open last year on National Public Lands Day in September was when the announcement was put out by the Forest Service. So we're looking ahead to National Public Lands Day this year and having our volunteer program kind of come back after COVID now that things are opening up again, getting back out into the field with everyone. And we've been doing that in 2021. We've had 4 stewardship projects so far with 43 volunteers for just over 320 hours, which is pretty impressive, especially because for that whole first quarter, it was really limited stuff we could do. Yeah, so it's been great to get back out with everyone. To kind of touch back on what Kurt was saying about some of those trails that disappear. In some places, it's kind of because they're underused. People aren't out there hiking them, so maybe they're not getting, just some of that brush gets knocked out of the way when people use them, or people ride horseback. They'll go out and clear out the trails for themselves sometimes. They're remote. They don't get a ton of visitation, but down here in Las Vegas, a lot of our trails get just an immense amount of visitation, which can make them kind of unsustainable in a different way from folks just really hitting the same areas really hard. And during the pandemic, a lot of people went outside, which is great. And I hope that people continue to go outside, and that when they go outside, they have a good time and they enjoy themselves, but that it's done responsibly and in a way that keeps our trails sustainable, safe, and open for folks. There's spots down here that have been hit really, really hard with a lot of trash and waste, with graffiti, or with folks, maybe, you hike up someplace and it's great and the view's wonderful, and on the way down, you think it might be faster to just blast through all the trail straight down the hill and cut across all the switchbacks, which, you shouldn't do, because then somebody else does it and everybody does it. And before you know it, there's a social trail that's built. And rather than our trails disappearing here, they tend to spread and grow weird limbs that go off into places in spiderwebby networks. So one way you can help out is to join some of our upcoming projects, which are back in swing. We're going to be trying to do at least a couple a month for the next few months until things can really gear back up to our old pace. But coming up, we've got a project actually for National Trails Day, which is this Saturday. It's full, so sorry to be a project tease, but you can't sign up if you haven't already. But we're going to be working to get the trails behind the Spring Mountains Visitor Gateway Center trimmed up a little bit, do a little cleaning, do a little interpretive talk out there with some folks, have a nice morning on Saturday to celebrate public lands and trails, and to get that prepped for opening, which will hopefully be happening soon this summer. We're always working with our partners and the Forest Service to get stuff like that moving along. But after that, we're going to be moving back up to maintain some of the really popular trails on the Spring Mountains. Kurt mentioned we've got some funding from the Great American Outdoors Act. We've got some funding from other sources to do trail work and remove graffiti in the Mount Charleston Wilderness area. So we'll be doing some South Loop maintenance in July on the first couple miles of South Loop, and assessing that, seeing where else up the trail there's work to do. We'll be doing the same on North Loop a couple weeks later, at the end of July on the 31st. And let's see what else is on here. Oh, our great partners over at REI and Outdoor Afro have organized a trip with us, a kayak trip, to do some cleanups and tamarisk removal on the Black Canyon Water Trail, which is a really interesting trail here in Southern Nevada. It's a river trail. It's the Black Canyon section of the Colorado River below Hoover Dam down to about Laughlin. And it's just a fun place to paddle and check out some hot springs and coves. So I recommend visiting it if you've never been there. So that's going to be a great trip, good partnership there with both of those groups. So what else have we got on the list? Oh, and graffiti removal. So August, look out for early August for some graffiti removal projects up on Mount Charleston. I'm coordinating with our friends at the Forest Service, and they're coordinating with their archaeology people to make sure there's nothing up there that's been damaged or that could be damaged by us removing paint. So that's what we've kind of got on the docket for the rest of the year through to National Public Lands Day again in September that I had mentioned, when we'll be coordinating with some of our partners from Southern Utah, from the university formerly known as Dixie State University. I'm not sure if they've officially changed their name yet. And some of our SNAP partners here at the Southern Nevada Agency Partnership to do a project for that day that might be a little bit further down south in the Christmas Tree Pass area. That's a spot that gets a lot of overuse and kind of misuse. There's a lot of good intention stuff that goes on down there. Folks like to decorate plants and set up memorials, but it is a wilderness area. It is on the Colorado watershed. It's not a place to tie plastic to plants. So we visit it rather more frequently than I wish we had to, but we did 3 cleanups there in 2020. On average, we take out between 200 and 400 pounds of plastic ornaments, decorations, lights, and garbage tied to trees. So having said all that in what feels like one very long sentence, I'd like to pass it off to our master cartographer, Jake. Thank you, everybody.
Wow, thanks, Peter. Sounds like you got a lot coming up. I'm going to share my screen real quick because I have a little presentation for you all, if I can figure out how. Okay, I'm Jake Kastner. I'm the GIS and Cartography Coordinator. And tonight I'm going to be talking to you about the mapping program at Friends of Nevada Wilderness. The mapping program really got its start in 2016 when then Director of Southern Nevada, Jose Witt, wrote a grant to go Mount Charleston to survey all of the user-created trails and all of the Forest Service system trails within the Spring Mountains National Recreation Area, which here's the map that eventually came out of that process. You can see on here a lot of the areas that Peter was talking about. I know the resolution's not great, just a tough scale. Here's the Griffith Peak Trail. On this map, it's labeled as closed currently, but when we're able to update it, we can actually put Griffith Peak Trail back on the map. And I also, during this trip in the Spring Mountains, I did it for over 2 years because there's many, many miles of system trails and as many or more miles of user-created trails. And along the way, I also recorded encounters with everybody. And there's a lot of sway there as well. You might see 120 people in an hour on the Mary Jane Falls Trail, and you might see like 5 people over 2 days on the Bonanza Trail. So a lot of variation there. So the field work that goes into it, really, I use a GPS unit. That's my main tool. The one that's pictured here is very similar to the one that I use. And I turned up the frequency on it so that it tracks me at maximum. So every 30 seconds, it takes a point of my location. And along the way, I also take waypoints of everything that's out there. Signs, junctions, points of interest. I will also note noxious weeds or wildlife sightings, basically anything of interest. And of course, photo document all that's out there. The photos really help when I come back into the office and work on my computer to make sure I've got everything straight and know what I'm looking at. With all these data, I then generate more descriptive data so that we can talk about relative difficulty, level of maintenance, and accessibility for all the different trails that we've looked at. And all these data then go to inform management agencies so they know what to do with the trails and Friends of Nevada Wilderness Trail Crew. I should also mention that I also receive a lot of data from our trail crew. Like Tara was mentioning before, they go out and do a lot of stuff, and so I don't necessarily have to survey a trail if I know they've just worked on it and opened it back up. Just going to talk about how I transform the data a little bit. I'm going to use the Ruby Mountains here as an example, but it's kind of the same process for each area. I start off with all the trails. So everything you see here in orange is a Forest Service system trail. And in the Rubies, it's a mess. There's lots and lots of stuff going on there. I then talk to the local agency. In this case, it was the Ruby Mountain Ranger District, and we identified target trails to go out and actually survey on the ground so that we can discover, what state they're in. And then I actually plan and conduct the survey. And here you can see that what ends up happening sometimes is maybe a little different than what I'd planned on doing. Some of the trails are inaccessible. Some of them don't exist at all. And so I end up gathering a plethora of data on whatever I can, while still keeping in mind those targets. And then with all the data that I've collected, I then process it into a succinct showing of what's actually out there. So this is what it will look like at the end. All the blue are what's actually out there and people can hike on, and the black here are motorized routes. So we go from what's on the left to more clear picture on the right. And I should note that all the Forest Service system trails are a part of the system, so I don't just like erase them. We usually say they're absent or poorly maintained. That way people know that they exist or existed, but we don't point them to a place where they're gonna get themselves into any sort of trouble. So after the Spring Mountains was done, I then had to look for another funding source. We went to the Recreational Trails program, which is administered by Nevada State Parks, and they've since funded 3 different maps. It started with the Toiyabe Crest National Recreation Trail, and then also the Ruby Crest National Recreation Trail, and finally I'm working currently on a Snake Range map. For the Toiyabes, I had an AmeriCorps member. We spent 50 days in the field and hiked about 250 miles. Evan was a great help and loved having him out in Nevada. On the right here, you can see this brochure. I was also able to work with Austin Chamber of Commerce, and they wanted to have a brochure in addition to the map so that they can distribute it to people and gain interest for the area. So that was a really nice, unique opportunity there. I'm going to go a little bit through what the maps actually look like. So here's like the panel that goes on the front of the map, and I'll just like, this is the Toiyabe map here. You can see it's got all of the panels. I don't know if you can see my box or whatever. But anyway, there's information about Friends itself, how you can become a member, how to contact us, and then also what wilderness is, what you can do in wilderness, and leave no trace principles, which are super important. And then there's always an emergency contact to the local administrative agency. Well, this is where we started with the RTP fund. This is the Toiyabe Crest map. And again, I realize the resolution isn't great, but these the actual size of this map is around 24 by 30 inches. So when we actually hold it up, you can see it a lot better. But there's a lot of work was done. This Toiyabe Crest map was actually the last map that I did solely in ArcGIS, which is the program I use to manipulate data. Here's the south end that has Arc Dome Wilderness in it. You can see this is the Toiyabe Crest Trail that's highlighted in green. Kurt is working later on these north to south loop here. This is Arc Dome Peak, Columbine and Stewart over here. So a lot of the areas that have already been talked about are on these maps. And here's some of those missing or absent trails down here on the southwest side. And the program is meant to sustain itself. So in selling the maps, we use that money to then perpetuate printings. So when we go into the next round of printings, we can update all this information and make it more current or more accurate to where we're at now. This is the southern half of the Ruby's map. I took a course in Adobe Illustrator, and it really, I think, brought the maps to life. There's a lot of it kind of sharpens the image and does a much better job at blending colors. So I think it sort of brought the maps to the next level. And all my maps also include sort of a little trail guide. This one just has the trail segment, the length, and how you can access it. And access is sometimes an issue, especially in the Rubies. You can see some of these trails don't actually have access to them. They exist, but there's no access from the bottom. You got to go around, or you have to gain permission from a private landowner. Currently, I'm working on the Snake Range map. Really love this map. I think it's coming out great. It's almost done. The only thing I really need to do is the ground truthing part. So once I'm able to go out and verify what's on the ground, then I can update this map, and hopefully we'll have it printed and available by the end of the year. This is the north half that's all Mount Moriah, and the southern half is Great Basin National Park and Highland Ridge. I try to zoom in a little bit. I know it's still kind of blurry, but you can see how much detail work goes into like the labels and all of the different symbols and trail junctions and stuff like that. So it's definitely quite the project to go through all of this. These maps are all available on our website. If you go to nevadawilderness.org and you click on the shop button that's highlighted here in the banner, it'll take you to our shop. If you go to page 2, there are all these maps available. The 3 here, the Ruby Crest, the Toiyabe Crest, and the Spring Mountains are all the RTP maps. And then I also was fortunate to work on a Desert National Wildlife Refuge map with the Fish and Wildlife Service. It was published by Southern Nevada Conservancy, and so we have a few that are available, but you can also purchase it through them. The maps are now also available for mobile download on Avenza Maps, which is an application you can get on your mobile device to download the map, and then you're able to use it without internet access. So you can navigate using it and track yourself that way. And I just ran a quick search in Avenza Maps for the rubies, and the maps that I produced came up in the top 3 hits there. It does charge, and we have like a vendor license to go through Avenza Maps, but we're charging $5 per map for both sides. The future plans for our mapping program, we've been working to gain funding for High Shells, Jarbidge, and Mount Rose. Those are the areas that we're focused on right now, but I have a huge wish list of all the other areas that I think would be great places to have recreation maps for Nevada. There's a laundry list of them. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see them here. I've been looking at ways to implement the Universal Trails Protocol, which is a way to kind of quantify what we're seeing on the ground in terms of steepness and difficulty. And that way you can gauge the trails off of each other, but also against other trails all around the world, wherever the Universal Trails Protocol is being implemented. And so I think that might be a nice way to then, I guess, bring the mapping up to the next level. I also think it might be an interesting idea and project to try to do this through a model builder and automate the process rather than just taking all ground measurements. And finally, I recently relocated to the East Coast. So I'm going to have to kind of try to rethink how the mapping program goes, and I'd like to maybe look into getting more volunteer involvement. We've had some volunteers work on this process in the past, and I think there's a room for doing a lot more of that, and it could probably open a lot of doors for getting some of this done quicker and giving people a great opportunity to get out there and see some really cool stuff. And with that, we'll take questions. You can ask questions specifically about the mapping program, or go ahead and Grace will moderate and ask questions to the panel.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Jake. I want to first give a quick shout out to Jenny and Barry, who I think are listening and helped out a lot with that Spring Mountains map, volunteered and did a lot of on the ground work. And then I'm sure you all see we have some upcoming volunteer opportunities here, both with the Central Eastern Nevada Trail Crew and here in Southern Nevada. So there's lots of different ways that we'd love for you to come help us out on the trail. I personally think doing trail work is like the most fun thing. It is definitely tiring, but you put in good work. You get to see what you've accomplished, which is just a really great feeling. And then you also get to know, like, you're helping out who knows how many people who go and hike these trails for years to come. So it's a really great feeling and a lot of fun, and you're always out with a good group of people. So we'd love to have everybody come out and join us whenever you can. So I'll leave this up for another moment or so, but I also wanted to open it up to one quick question. And then I know that Greg had a comment, and so I'll pass it to you, Greg, after that. And other folks, please feel free to drop in questions here on Zoom in the chat or on Facebook in the comments. And so this question I actually intended to introduce everybody with, but it is, what is your favorite saw, crosscut saw, or other trail tool that you use when you're out in wild Nevada? Peter, do you want to
answer first? Yeah, well, there was also a question, I think, in the chat that I can address about the Harris Springs Road up to the trailhead for Griffith. It is a rough road. It has not been improved. The dicey parts are still there. I would say you need high clearance more than four-wheel drive, though, and just to drive real careful. It looks scarier than it is. But having said that, if you get scared on it, there's not really any place to turn around. So it is a steep road. You need high clearance, and you need to be, I would say, a careful and competent off-road driver. It's no joke, that road, but it is passable. Or you can start up from the other end at South Loop. It adds 4 miles on your hike. They're 4 exciting, strenuous miles that seem to be almost vertical. But you get up there to the saddle, and then you just have to hike downhill all the way to the other end and have someone pick you up or hike back. So that's the other option. But yeah, my favorite saw is not one of our saws, I guess. It's just a tool. I'm a big fan of my hammer, my rock hammer that lives up here in the office. Because when you have a hammer, you can fix anything. Like if you can't open something, you can break it. If there's a rock in the trail, you can move it by breaking it. If there's like a piece of wood sticking out and you don't want to use the axe because you're tired, you can bash it. It's a screwdriver. It's everything. So yeah, just have a hammer and you're always set. Who's next?
Awesome. Thanks, Peter.
Kurt, are you going? I'll go.
Yeah, I'll go. So
Okay, go, Kurt.
choose between saws is like between your children. So I have a few personal saws, but probably my number one saw that I don't get to use enough, but I love her to death, is Carmelita. She's a 6-foot M-tooth, 2-person saw. The one I probably use the most and carry when I go out on a logging trip would be my Champion M-tooth, the Dude. So yeah, either one of those work for me, either the Dude or Carmelita.
Awesome. Terry, you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. My favorite saw is named El Jefe. It's a 2-person bucking saw, and it's really thin, so it's nice. You can get wedges in pretty quickly. I love that saw, but I will say it's hard to say a favorite tool, but I think along similar lines of Peter, the Pickmatic is kind of just a bigger version of the rock hammer. So I'm gonna go with the pick. That's definitely my favorite tool. You can get a lot of rocks moved with that tool.
Awesome. Jake, do you want to give us an answer as well?
I guess so. My best tool is my GPS unit. That does everything for me basically. But now I'm kind of thinking I might need to invest in a really nice hammer.
Agreed.
So I get mad, I can smash stuff.
Perfect. All right. Well, Greg, if you want to take yourself off mute, we'd love to hear your comment. And then I have a couple other questions too that we'll make sure to get to.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so my name is Greg Van Osprey. I actually happen to be an employee of the Humboldt-Toiyabe National Forest. I'm a geologist. I cover the Santa Rosas, Mountain City, Ruby Mountains, East Humboldt, and I was actually the geologist down in Austin Tonopah before this. So I covered that area for 3.5 years. So I need to add the disclaimer that nothing I say reflects the opinions of the agency, necessarily reflects the opinions of the agency. Having said that, I just wanted to let you guys know that we really appreciate the work you do. A lot of us are very passionate about trails. I know I was thinking that my fiance and I may have actually run into Tara on the Overland Lake Trail with the GBI crew this past summer. I'm not sure if there was a GBI crew there separately. In any event, yeah, we've benefited quite a bit from the work that you've done. And Kurt, you're absolutely right with the way that funding is, going into the future, unless there's a huge change, continuing to leverage, external partnerships and, collaborate and work together is, really the way of the future. And we really, want to maintain access to these places for spiritual renewal for as much as we can. I think it's, really important for a lot of us, and a lot of us on the forest are equally, passionate about the lands that we manage. And we actually have a volunteer event in the Mo Canyon this Saturday, and me and quite a few people will be there. So yeah, just, thank you. And, we appreciate the work you do.
Thank you, Greg. That is always wonderful to hear. So we really appreciate it. I think I'm going to go ahead and speak for all of us that, we can't do what we do without great partnerships, and, having really great people to work with at the Forest Service and elsewhere is, pivotal to making all of it happen. So thank you as well. All right, and I think our next question is from Kathy, and this one will be for Peter. Kathy said, great presentation, love the updates and maps. When will the Southern Nevada volunteer opportunities be online?
Well, Kathy, they'll be online really soon. They're on the website right now with a little bit of information. I'm going to be getting out in the field with our returning AmeriCorps member and one of our new staff, our new staff member, Clarice, who just started this week soon, to kind of, check on exactly what we'll be doing. But the signups for RCPs are going to open about a month before each project. So the next one coming up is going to be, it's on there right now, is July 17th. So June 17th, that'll open. And then on the 30th, the next project will open. And there might be some stuff that gets added on there. In the interim, for sure, there'll be more coming up in September and into the fall as things cool down. Yeah, you can sign up soon. You can email me too and ask if you've got any questions about that stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Yes, and if you haven't caught on, all of our emails are just our first name at nevadawilderness.org, and we're always happy to answer questions, or at least do our best to answer them. All right, and we have a question from Daniel, and this one will definitely be for you, Jake. And he asks, for volunteering with the GIS program, what kind of training, skills, equipment would you need from volunteers?
Well, so the volunteer part of the program is something that we will have to discuss, I think, as a group to develop more. But off the top of my head, I would say a GPS and a camera would do you real good. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll have to formulate the answer on that more by talking to some of my colleagues and making a plan for it, especially as we move forward with the program. Right now, I'm finishing up the snake range, and we have, like I said, we're working on formulating a plan to go on to the next map. So when we get there, definitely we'll continue to think about how we can get volunteers more involved. We've had some case-by-case volunteer work in the past that's been really pivotal, and so I don't see why we couldn't do that again. And I know Jenny and Barry are probably interested in getting out there for some more action as well.
Awesome.
Steal them from me, Jake. I need Jenny and Barry.
Yeah, I totally agree with Jake. I think, we have some independent volunteers here in Southern Nevada doing spring monitoring, and that training skills piece is definitely the safety and knowing, kind of having some backcountry experience is really key. But yeah, we're excited about the opportunities that are coming up.
Yeah, I would say too, if you want to go out on your own and take some GPS tracks and send them my way, I'm all game. I mean, in terms of us organizing it and liability and stuff, we'll have to look more into that, but I'm all game for all the data that comes my way. So feel free.
Awesome. All right, and we have, I think, another comment here that I must have missed a little earlier from Jim, who said, too bad we can't change the name of Christmas Tree Pass to help eliminate some of the plastic ornaments. And I think we'd all just nod our head and agree with that. And maybe we can. We'd love to see that happen and help prevent a lot of that litter that, you know, the birds end up eating and cause harm to other critters as well. Awesome. Well, with that, do any of our speakers want to say any final words? All right, Tara.
I just had a quick comment related to what Jake was talking about. If anyone is out in central, eastern, or northern Nevada and they find trails that are not in good shape, feel free to just email us and let us know. We do a lot of work trying to figure out where the best prioritized trails to work on are. So it's definitely helpful to know where people want to be and where they want to be hiking and where we need to be. So definitely open communication there. And again, thanks everyone for spending the evening with us. It's super fun.
Thank you, Tara. Looks like Kurt, you're unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for everybody for spending their evening with us. You know, I really appreciate it. It's always tough to do a presentation when no one's there. So, you know, thanks a lot for listening to us. And once again, if you want to do some trail work this summer, go to the website and, you know, sign up for either Southern Nevada or join me out in Arc Dome and Jarbidge. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Kurt. All right. And I don't think I'm hearing anything from Peter or Jake. But we have one, I'm going to call this our last question from Jim. Are campsites part of Friends cleanup efforts? And I think that Kurt may actually have a relevant answer to this from one of the projects you did last summer.
Absolutely. As Grace said, last summer there was an outfitter camp in the High Shells Wilderness up Clee Creek, and we went ahead and went in there with backcountry horsemen. We would have been there for a week packing it out if it wasn't for the horsemen. So yeah, absolutely, we pack stuff out as well. Fortunately, in Southern Nevada, there's usually not an abundance of trash everywhere, but yeah, the crew's really good about picking stuff up. Of course, you know, if it looks like something out of the ordinary is going on, we leave it and contact our Forest Service partners to deal with. And then also outfitters and guides, you know, they cache stuff over the summer. I always get a lot of calls from folks saying, hey, I found all this stuff up here, you know, come on, I'll help you get it out. And it turns out to be an outfitters camp. So, you know, but absolutely, trash, there's no place for it. And you know, we can pack it out as well. And if it's really, really bad, then we organize a trip with backcountry horsemen and get it out that way. But yeah, thanks for that question. And I encourage all of you when you're out there, and I know some of you, especially Susan Murphy, is a trash hero. If you're out there, you know, it just takes a second. Just pick it up. You know, you don't want to pick up any chemicals that you don't know what it is, or you know, weird stuff, but you know, if you can, if it's trash, yeah, pick it up.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to throw up those trail dates one last time while I close us out. But thank you everybody for joining us. We are really glad that you tuned in and appreciate you joining us for the Wild Speaker Series tonight. And we invite you to tune in next month for our Wild Speaker Series, which will be on July 1st. The topic is the importance of the artist in nature. So we'll be talking about how artists are critical for our mission and for getting areas protected. And it's really, we'll be in this instance talking with 3 photographers, and it's through their lens that many people around the world become inspired to visit and protect the wildlands of Nevada. So it should be a really great conversation, and we hope that you can all join us, and also that you are able to get out and enjoy the trails in wild Nevada sometime this summer. So with that, happy National Trails Day, and thanks everybody for tuning in.